He was chosen by God, crowned by a prophet, and admired by a nation. Yet he died by his own sword. What destroyed King Saul wasn't an enemy army, it was his pride. This is the tragic downfall of a man who could have been great, if only he had conquered himself. Welcome to Psyche of Faith, where we explore the deep, raw emotions and psychological battles behind the stories of Scripture. If you've ever wrestled with self-worth, insecurity, or identity, you are not alone, and neither were they. Saul was Israel's first king. He stood taller than anyone in the land, literally and figuratively. When the people cried out for a ruler, God gave them Saul. He wasn't a tyrant at first. In fact, he was humble, hiding among the baggage when Samuel first announced him king. But something changed. Over time, the insecurities that once made him cautious began to rot into obsession. His crown became a mirror, reflecting only his fears. And what started as divine favor ended in divine silence. The man anointed to lead lost his way, not from lack of strength, but from a fractured identity he never learned to face. Saul's greatest war wasn't with the Philistines. It wasn't even with David. It was within. Pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the armor we wear to hide a bleeding self-worth. Saul's pride was reactive. It wasn't born from confidence but fear. Every time David succeeded, Saul didn't just hear cheers, he heard threats. They sing louder for him than for me. They love him more. These weren't the thoughts of a secure king, they were the whispers of an identity built on comparison. And comparison is a thief that always steals in silence. When your value depends on someone else's failure, peace becomes impossible. Saul wasn't fighting David. He was fighting the feeling of being replaceable. The tragedy deepens when you realize Saul had every chance to be healed. He had Samuel, a spiritual mentor. He had victories, signs of God's presence. He even had music, David played to calm his spirit. But Saul refused to look inward. Instead he hardened. When Samuel rebuked him for disobeying God, Saul begged not for forgiveness, but for public honor. Come back with me, so the elders will still respect me. That moment revealed it all. Saul cared more about image than intimacy with God. His pride was a mask, a desperate attempt to appear whole when he was breaking. And that's how many live today. More afraid of looking weak than actually being healed. Let's talk about control. Saul's paranoia made him cling to power with white knuckles. Even as God's spirit departed from him, he tried to maintain the illusion of strength. He threw spears at David, not just to kill but to silence a threat to his ego. But control is an illusion. The tighter Saul tried to grip his kingdom, the faster it slipped through his fingers. People followed him but they no longer trusted him. His own son Jonathan admired David. That broke Saul. Not because David was evil, but because Saul couldn't accept being surpassed. A healthy leader mentors the next generation. A wounded one tries to destroy it. Saul became the very thing he feared, forgotten. It's easy to judge Saul, but have you ever seen yourself in him? The moments where you clung to something just to feel valuable? The rage that rises when you feel overlooked or replaced. Saul is a mirror. He shows us what happens when we base our worth on applause. The applause fades. People change. Seasons shift. If your identity is built on the fragile praise of others, then your soul will always live on edge. Saul never learned to anchor himself in God's approval. He tried to fill the hole in his heart with power, recognition, and fear-based leadership. But those things don't satisfy. They only isolate. And isolation is where lies grow loudest. By the end, Saul was unrecognizable. He consulted a witch. A man once anointed by God now sought guidance in darkness. That's what shame can do. When you believe you've failed beyond repair, you stop reaching for light. You settle for whatever numbs the pain. Saul's death wasn't just physical, it was emotional and spiritual long before the battlefield. He died the moment he lost the ability to see himself as loved without a crown. Pride isolated him. And pride killed him. But what if he had repented? What if he had asked God not just for position, but for healing? That's the sobering tragedy of Saul's story. He didn't have to fall. But he chose pride over vulnerability. And maybe that's the real message here. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to wear your crown every day. What you do need is the courage to be honest. Saul didn't fail because he was weak, he failed because he hid. The call of healing begins with confession. Not to everyone, but to God. To someone safe. To yourself. The parts of you that feel jealous, insecure, forgotten, they don't disqualify you. They reveal where love is most needed. You are not your achievements. You are not your failures. You are not what others say you are. You are who God says you are, even if your mind still struggles to believe it. That's where healing begins. If you've ever felt like Saul, please hear this: your story isn't over. Saul believed the lie that his worth was tied to his role. So when the role changed, he collapsed. But identity goes deeper than your position, your followers, your applause. You were made for more than performing. You were made for connection. Saul's greatest loss wasn't his crown. It was his relationship with God, and with himself. He stopped listening. He stopped trusting. Don't let pride do the same in your life. Let yourself be broken so you can be rebuilt. That's not weakness. That's power. And there is still time to choose differently. In the silence of Saul's last days, you can almost hear the echo of a man searching for peace he never found. No trumpet sounded for his passing. No song was written for his memory. His story faded not with a celebration, but with a quiet fall on his own sword, a metaphor so painful it lingers through generations. The blade didn't just pierce his flesh, it punctured the illusion. The illusion that power could protect him. That image was enough. That performance could replace presence. Saul's story whispers to us through the ages: don't lose yourself trying to be someone you were never called to be. Because God didn't choose Saul for his strength, He chose him for his surrender. A surrender Saul never gave. What makes Saul's life so haunting isn't that he failed. It's that he refused to start again. Redemption was within reach, but pride kept the door closed. And maybe that's why his story still matters. Because you and I stand in that same place sometimes, hurt, confused, afraid of being small. We reach for control when we feel unseen. But God doesn't call the perfect. He calls the present. And when you're willing to lay down the weight of having to be enough, you finally make space to be healed. Saul's tragedy doesn't have to be yours. You can choose humility over hiding, grace over grasping, wholeness over the hunger for approval. Look in the mirror. Who do you see? Is it someone wearing invisible armor, fighting to be accepted, terrified to be found out? That's the Saul within all of us. But now, imagine shedding that armor. Standing bare before God, no title, no applause, no reputation, just you. And still being loved. That's the miracle Saul never believed. But you still can. You are seen. You are held. You are known. And not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Not because of your victories, but because of His grace. That truth can't be earned, only received. Saul resisted it. But you don't have to. So what now? What do we do with Saul's story? We mourn it. We learn from it. And then, we rewrite our own. Not with fear, not with fake strength, but with surrender. Saul's life teaches us that power without purpose collapses. That calling without character decays. That a throne is useless if the soul beneath it is lost. But there's hope. If Saul's downfall shows us what pride can destroy, then your healing can reveal what humility can rebuild. Take off the mask. Lay down the fear. Open your hands. God doesn't need your perfection. He desires your presence. And He never stopped calling you, even in your silence. And maybe that's the beauty of grace. It doesn't erase the past, but it rewrites the ending. Saul's ending doesn't have to be yours. His isolation doesn't have to define you. His fear doesn't have to cage you. You have a choice. Today. Now. To rise not through pride, but through honesty. To find peace not in applause, but in God's quiet whisper. He's still speaking. Still waiting. Still loving. And even if you feel far gone, even if you've thrown spears in anger or hid behind titles, He still says, come. And those who come broken are never turned away. King Saul's story is a warning, yes, but it's also an invitation. An invitation to see the war inside you and choose a different ending. Pride isolates, but humility connects. And healing doesn't begin with answers. It begins with honesty. If Saul's fall taught us anything, it's that identity not rooted in truth will always crumble. So choose today to be seen. Not for who you pretend to be, but for who you are. That's where the real crown is found. If this story spoke to something inside you, you're not alone. On Psyche of Faith, we explore these raw battles that many are too afraid to talk about, but deeply need to. Subscribe and join the journey with us. Every character in Scripture had a story behind the story, and Saul's might be the most relatable of all. Because deep down, we all wrestle with value, identity, and the fear of not being enough. But that fear loses power when we bring it into the light. So if this episode moved you, consider sharing it with someone walking through self-doubt. Let's break the silence together. There's more to come. More biblical figures. More emotional insight. More healing. So stay connected. Comment below what part of Saul's story hit you the hardest, or what part of your story you're ready to reclaim. Because healing isn't a moment, it's a journey. And we're walking it with you. Thank you for watching Psyche of Faith. You were never meant to fight these inner battles alone. Keep exploring, keep healing, and above all, keep showing up. Even broken. Especially broken. Because sometimes, the most powerful faith is just choosing not to give up.